Right now, you're seeing this, hearing this, and somewhere underneath both of those, there's the quiet certainty of being someone rather than no one at all. It's the most obvious fact you have. Or is it? It's also the one thing science has never been able to explain. 2000 years ago, a Hermetic text gave an answer. Mind comes first, matter follows. Your experience right now isn't something the universe produces, it's something the universe is made of. The Kybalion repeated the same claim in 1908. And the strange part isn't that they said it. The strange part is that modern science still can't prove they're wrong. That your experience right now might genuinely be more than something your brain produces. The claim itself is simple to state and surprisingly difficult to dismiss. Idealism, the position that mind, not matter, is the fundamental nature of reality, has been defended seriously since at least the 18th century, when the philosopher George Berkeley argued that physical objects only exist insofar as they are perceived. Arthur Schopenhauer, a century later, built an entire system on a related premise. Centuries before either of them, Poimandres had already said something strikingly similar. Before anything else existed, there was only mind, and the physical cosmos was generated from it. The argument for taking this seriously usually starts from a single observation. Everything you have ever known, every color, every sound, every fact about the external world, has come to you through experience. You have never had direct, unmediated access to matter itself. You have only ever had access to your experience of it. Physical science describes structure beautifully, how neurons fire, how light wavelengths correspond to color perception. But it has never actually explained why any of that structure is accompanied by subjective experience at all. Why does processing the wavelength of light we call red feel like anything, rather than simply happening in the dark, the way a thermostat processes temperature without anyone supposing the thermostat feels cold? This gap, between explaining the mechanism and explaining the experience, has a name in contemporary philosophy. It is one of the most actively debated problems in the field, and it is the reason this question has refused to close for 2.5 centuries. Here is the complication, and it is a serious one. Idealism has to contend with the single most successful explanatory framework in the history of science. Physicalism, the working assumption that physical processes are sufficient to explain everything, including the mind, has produced staggering, undeniable results. Neuroscience has mapped extraordinarily precise correlations between brain states and mental states. Damage one region and a particular capacity vanishes predictably every time. Anesthesia reliably switches consciousness off. The right drug can alter a single aspect of experience while leaving everything else untouched. Every advance in this research has assumed, and been rewarded for assuming, that the mind is what the brain does. There is also a deeper historical pattern working against any claim that mind might be fundamental. For centuries, phenomena that once seemed to require something beyond ordinary matter, life itself, the motion of the planets, the origin of species, were eventually explained in entirely physical terms, no special non-physical ingredient required. Given that track record, the reasonable scientific instinct is to expect consciousness will eventually follow the same path. Calling it a permanent mystery starts to look, to many serious scientists, like a failure of explanation rather than evidence of anything genuinely fundamental. This is not a fringe objection. Philosophers working specifically in this area argue that the experience of consciousness is simply a difficult engineering problem, not a metaphysical one. A problem that has not yet been solved, the way many scientific problems take generations to solve, rather than a sign that physical science is permanently incapable of solving it. The honest position, stated plainly, physicalism has earned the right to be the default assumption through an enormous track record of success. The burden of proof sits heavily against any claim that mind might be more fundamental than matter, including the claim Poimandres made and the claim Atkinson later borrowed. But a burden of proof being heavy is not the same as a question being closed. Explaining how a brain works is not the same as explaining why it works.
Every advance in neuroscience answers the first question. Not one of them has yet answered the second. That gap is where this investigation actually lives.
In 1995, a philosopher named David Chalmers gave this gap a name. He called it the hard problem of consciousness, and the name stuck because it drew a line nobody had drawn quite so cleanly before. On one side, the easy problems, how the brain sorts a red signal from a green one, how it stores a memory, how it reports on its own states. Easy is generous, these are fiendishly hard. But they're the kind of hard that science knows how to chip away at. The hard problem is different in kind. It isn't asking how the machinery works. It's asking why the machinery is accompanied by an inner life at all. Why isn't all that processing just happening in the dark? 30 years later, there is still no agreed answer. What there is instead is a set of rival camps, and the most useful way to understand them is to watch each one try to solve the problem and see exactly where it leaves people unsatisfied. Start with the boldest move. Some philosophers say the hard problem is a trick of the mind, that there is nothing there to explain. The redness you're seeing right now, the painfulness of pain, the sense that experience is a rich inner thing, that, they argue, is a kind of illusion the brain generates about itself. Get the science right, and the whole mystery is supposed to simply vanish, like metaphysical smoke, gone the moment you stop looking for it. It's a serious position held by serious people, but it asks you to accept something that feels almost impossible to accept. That the most immediate, undeniable fact of your existence, that you are experiencing anything at all, is, in some sense, not what it seems. For most people, that's a bridge too far. If your theory of consciousness concludes that consciousness isn't really there, many will say you haven't solved the problem. You've changed the subject. So Chalmers himself went the other way. If experience can't be explained away, he argued, then maybe it shouldn't be explained away at all. Maybe it's simply fundamental, a basic feature of reality, the way mass and electric charge are basic. You don't explain charge by reducing it to something else. You take it as a building block. Treat consciousness the same way, connected to the physical brain by laws we haven't discovered yet. That's elegant, but it comes at a price, and the price is large. It means adding a whole new fundamental ingredient to our picture of the universe, and it leaves the obvious question wide open. If mind is fundamental, where exactly is it? Only in brains? Why there and nowhere else? Philosophy can argue about this forever. Can science actually test any of it? One theory tries. Integrated Information Theory, or IIT, proposes that consciousness corresponds to how tightly a system's information is woven together, and it puts a number on it. In principle, a measurement of how conscious any system is. It's not idle speculation either. It's already produced real clinical tools for detecting awareness in patients who can't respond. And then, in September 2023, Integrated Information Theory detonated a fight that's worth telling honestly. More than 100 consciousness researchers signed an open letter calling the theory pseudoscience, arguing it had earned glowing headlines without being properly tested. The response was just as fierce, and it didn't come only from the theory's fans. Researchers who don't share its conclusions stepped in to defend it as real science, and the editors of Nature later acknowledged that the word pseudoscience had no business in what was supposed to be a scientific disagreement. Then, in 2025, a rare kind of experiment tried to settle it directly. Two rival camps, Integrated Information Theory and its main competitor, Global Workspace Theory, agreed in advance on what each theory predicted before anyone saw a shred of data. Then, 256 people had their brains scanned 3 different ways while the predictions were tested head-to-head. Neither theory won. The brain activity matched some of what Integrated Information Theory expected and some of what its rival expected, and it broke the rules of both theories at the same time in ways neither side had predicted. The fight that followed wasn't about a winner.
It was about which theory had been damaged less. 2 years on, the fight isn't settled. And that, not any one camp's answer, is the actual finding of this episode. Step back from all of it, and the striking thing isn't that someone has proven mind is fundamental. Nobody has. It's that the question is genuinely, fully open. And the people who can't close it aren't mystics or cranks. They're the most credentialed minds in philosophy and neuroscience, arguing with each other in good faith at the highest level of the field.
Whether mind is the ground of reality, a byproduct of it, or a story the brain tells about itself, remains right now unsettled, in either direction. If this kind of investigation is what you came here for, subscribing is the best way to follow where it leads. New episodes examine the Hermetic tradition from every angle: philosophy, history, science, and the record of human experience. It would be easy to file all of this under abstract philosophy and move on. It isn't only that. What you believe about this question, even quietly, even without realizing it, shapes how you actually approach several things, and shapes what you can usefully do about them. Take free will. If consciousness is, as the illusionists argue, just a story the brain tells itself after the fact, narration with no real causal power, then the felt sense that you're choosing anything is, strictly, an illusion. Taken seriously, that view tends to push people toward fatalism. Why bother trying to change if the outcome was never really yours to pick? But if mind is doing real work in the world, rather than just narrating what was always going to happen, then the sense that you can actually choose differently isn't a trick. It's accurate. And that has a direct, usable consequence. It means the effort of trying to change a habit or a reaction isn't wasted motion dressed up as agency. It's the actual mechanism doing its job. You don't need to resolve the philosophy to use this, but believing your choices are real, rather than treating them as theater, is itself a more effective starting position for anyone trying to change anything about how they think or act. Take death. On the purely physical view, the end of brain activity is, by definition, the end of experience, and there's nothing further to investigate, only to accept. That has its own kind of use. It's a clean basis for living fully now, on the grounds that now is genuinely all there is. On the view where mind is more fundamental, the question doesn't get answered, but it doesn't get closed either, which is its own kind of usable position, just a different one. It means treating uncertainty about what happens after as an honest, open question, rather than either false comfort or settled despair. Neither stance is more correct to adopt for comfort's sake. But knowing which one you actually hold, rather than drifting between both without noticing, changes how steadily you can sit with the question at all. None of this settles the philosophical question, and nothing here is a verdict on how you should live. But it's worth being honest about why the question refuses to go away. It isn't stubbornness on the part of philosophers with nothing better to do. It's that almost everything we care about, choice, mortality, how we make peace with what we can't control, quietly assumes an answer to a question nobody has actually answered yet. Which side you lean toward, even provisionally, changes what you can usefully do next. So where does this leave the oldest claim this channel has investigated? Not vindicated exactly. This episode hasn't proven that mind precedes matter, and the careful answer is that science hasn't confirmed what Atkinson or the author of Poimandres claimed. But that's a different thing from saying they were wrong. And the reason it's different is worth taking seriously. The hard problem of consciousness remains, by the testimony of researchers working at the very center of the field, genuinely unresolved. Naturalistic dualism, treating mind as fundamental on a par with mass or charge, is taken seriously by serious philosophers, not as ancient wisdom rediscovered, but as a live position built from entirely independent, modern reasoning.
And the dispute over how to even measure consciousness scientifically remains, as of this recording, an open and occasionally bitter argument among people whose entire careers are built on getting this right. 2,500 years separate Poimandres from David Chalmers. And after all of that time, all of that argument, all of that genuine scientific progress, the most honest answer available is the same one this channel has given to every claim it has examined so far. This is not settled, and pretending otherwise would not be rigor. It would be its opposite. What is worth sitting with is simply this. Across radically different eras, in radically different vocabularies, serious thinkers keep arriving back at the same fundamental question. That alone does not make the question true, but it makes it very difficult to call it merely ancient superstition that modern thought has simply outgrown. It hasn't outgrown it. It's still asking it.
So the question this episode leaves you with is the same one it opened with, just turned back on you directly. Are we really simply existing in a purely physical universe? Or is this, all of it, including the experience you're having right now, a creation of our collective minds? If this is the kind of inquiry you have been looking for, rigorous, honest, and genuinely open, subscribe and follow along. Every episode takes one question from the Hermetic tradition and examines it from every direction available to us.